Why would Jesus appear in hell to rescue lost souls? In many of the stories shared on this channel, people often firmly believe that God would never set foot in such a place. But today a testimony has come that brings an answer. Follow the journey of this man because he met the Lord, and Jesus revealed the truth to him. This revelation may bring comfort to many wandering souls and strengthen your faith. Please listen carefully and comment your name and the city you live in so we can support you in prayer and ask the Lord to grant you discernment. Subscribe to our channel and join us in spreading God's light, for every step you take here is a declaration of faith. Now, let us listen to this testimony. My name is John, from Chicago, where I lived without a thought for God. As an atheist, I dismissed tales of a savior rescuing souls from demonic grips. My life revolved around my construction job, chasing paychecks and indulging in fleeting pleasures like late-night drinks and loud music. Life to me was about earning, enjoying, and facing death as the final end. On March 15th, 2025, my world shattered. After a grueling shift, I drove home on a rain-slicked highway, my eyes heavy from exhaustion. A truck swerved into my lane, and the crash was instant, metal screaming as my car crumpled. Darkness swallowed me, my soul torn from my body, plunging into a cold, suffocating void. The air grew icy, thick with a stench like sulfur mixed with rotting flesh. I opened my eyes to a jagged path of sharp stones, each cutting into my bare feet, leading to a massive black gate that pulsed like a living beast's maw. Screams echoed from beyond, faint yet piercing, a chorus of despair that chilled my core. I stood frozen, realizing I had fallen into hell, a place I'd mocked as a myth. The darkness wasn't mere absence of light, it writhed, pressing against me like a damp, heavy shroud. The ground burned, glowing red with embers, each step searing my soles, the pain sharp and relentless. The air carried a metallic tang, mixed with decay, stinging my lungs with every breath. My past life flashed before me, every moment of denial now awake, pulling me deeper. No one had prepared me for this reality. The gate loomed closer, its edges glowing with an unnatural fire, the screams growing louder, a cacophony of torment. An unseen force tugged me forward, my feet scraping against the jagged stones, blood trailing behind. Hell was no story, it was my new existence, a consequence I couldn't escape. The path stretched endlessly, lined with countless shadows, their faces hollow, eyes sunken, moving in silence. The smell intensified, a blend of charred flesh, sulfur, and something sickly sweet clogging my throat. Each step echoed like a hammer, a judgment I couldn't outrun. My choices, my pride, my rejection of faith had carved this path to damnation. I remembered my mother's prayers, her gentle pleas to seek God, ignored in my youth. The air grew denser, the heat rising, waves of it rolling over me, sweat mixing with the stench. Shadows shuffled beside me, their moans blending with the distant wails, a reminder of shared guilt. I walked on, the gate's glow intensifying, dread sinking deeper into my soul. As I neared the gate, the ground quaked, cracks splitting open, releasing plumes of acrid steam. The screams grew sharper, voices pleading for mercy that never came. My heart pounded, the reality of my fate settling in, heavy and unshakable. This was no dream. Every moment was real, a truth I'd denied for too long. The path twisted, descending into a cavernous expanse, the air hotter, the stench more oppressive. I saw others, young and old, their faces etched with regret, their steps slow and pained. The gate's jaws seemed to pulse, hungry, drawing us closer. My life of denial had led me here, and I could no longer turn back. The stones beneath grew sharper, cutting deeper, blood pooling in my footprints, the pain a constant reminder. The air was alive, heavy with despair, whispering accusations of my sins. I wanted to scream, to deny this place, but the truth was undeniable. Hell was my reality, and I was its prisoner. As I moved forward, the darkness thickened, a living force that seemed to feed on my fear. The screams grew louder, a relentless wail that echoed off unseen walls, each sound a stab to my soul. The gate's fire cast shadows, grotesque shapes dancing, mocking my approach. I was alone, yet surrounded, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. In hell, my sins became chains, each one a burning weight dragging me into torment. My pride, my rejection of God, my nights lost to drunken revelry, all fueled the punishment I faced. Demons emerged from the shadows, their skin charred, eyes glowing like molten embers, claws sharp as knives. Their laughter was a grating rasp, vibrating through the air, a sound that mocked my existence. I protested, insisting no God existed to judge my indifference. The demons paused, their eyes narrowing, then burst into cruel laughter, reveling in my denial. They saw my disbelief as their triumph, a soul ripe for their torment. Their joy was a venom, seeping into me, amplifying my dread. They led me through a scorched wasteland, the ground glowing with fiery coals, each step a blaze of pain. We approached a towering structure, a grotesque castle of black stone, its walls slick with oozing tar that dripped like blood. The air was thick, heavy with sulfur and a false sweetness that masked the rot beneath. Inside they offered a feast, tables laden with shimmering food, promising pleasure I craved. I reached for a goblet, its surface glinting, but my hand twisted, skin darkening, fingers stretching into claws. A pool of dark liquid reflected my face, now grotesque, eyes sinking, resembling the demons around me. Terror gripped me. I was transforming, my humanity slipping into something monstrous. The feast was a deception, a lure to bind me to this place forever. I fled, my legs heavy, the ground searing my feet, each step a jolt of agony. The castle's halls twisted, endless, walls pulsing like living flesh, the air thick with despair. Demons pursued, their laughter echoing, a relentless taunt that drowned my thoughts. I ran, but the paths looped, trapping me in a maze of fire and shadow. My body ached, the transformation creeping further, my skin roughening, my breath ragged. The air grew hotter, the stench of sulfur and decay choking me, a bitter taste coating my tongue. I stumbled, the ground cutting deeper, blood and ash mixing in my wake. There was no escape. Hell's grip was unyielding, my fate sealed by my own choices. In a moment of desperation, I recalled a name I'd never spoken, never believed. I screamed Jesus 3 times, my voice raw, echoing in the cavernous void. A blinding light pierced the darkness, pure and radiant, cutting through the haze like a blade. It enveloped me, halting my transformation, restoring my human form, a miracle amid the horror. The demons shrieked, their forms shrinking, retreating from the light's power. The ground still burned, the air thick with rot, but the light was a shield, a promise of salvation. My heart pounded, the name of Jesus a lifeline I'd never known I had. His power alone had stopped the demons, a truth I could no longer deny. The light lingered, its warmth a stark contrast to the searing heat around me. The screams of others continued, a distant wail, but the light held me, steady and sure. I stood, my body whole, the transformation undone, but the weight of my sins remained. This moment was a turning point, a glimpse of hope in a place of despair. As the light faded, the demons' laughter returned, fainter but persistent, a reminder of their claim. The air grew heavy again, the stench creeping back, but the memory of that light burned in my mind. I had called on Jesus, and he had answered, even here. The path forward was unclear, but his name was my anchor, a truth I clung to. The radiant light from my desperate cry grew stronger, slicing through the oppressive darkness like a blade forged in divine fire, its brilliance cutting away the shadows of hell. A figure emerged, clothed in a white robe that shimmered with unearthly purity, its fabric untouched by the surrounding flames or the chaos that gripped this realm. His face glowed with a love so profound it seemed to pierce my very soul, his authority radiating like a beacon of peace amid the torment. I knew instantly this was Jesus Christ, the Savior I had denied throughout my life. He gazed at me, his eyes both piercing and compassionate, seeing every hidden corner of my heart, and said, "John, my lost child, you are safe now." He extended his hand, and my twisted, burning body began to heal, my charred skin restoring to its natural state, the searing pain fading like wax under a gentle flame. His touch was warm, a soothing balm that countered the fiery agony I'd endured, bringing a peace that stood in stark contrast to the horrors around me. The demons, once bold, cowered, their mocking laughter silenced, their grotesque forms shrinking under the weight of his presence. I asked, my voice trembling with awe, if he was truly real, or if this was a dream born of my mind's desperation. Why would the Lord of all descend to this wretched place of fire and despair? Jesus answered, I came not to suffer, but to proclaim victory. I have conquered sin and death, and I preach truth to the spirits imprisoned here, declaring my triumph over all evil. He pointed to the tormented souls nearby, their bodies writhing in flames, their cries echoing through the cavernous gloom, a relentless chorus of anguish that filled the sulphurous air. They chose this path by rejecting my light, he said, his voice steady yet heavy with sorrow, each word carrying the weight of eternal truth. The ground beneath us burned, its embers glowing red, the stench of burning flesh clinging to my senses, yet his presence was an oasis, untouched by hell's chaos. His words reshaped my understanding, revealing the consequences of my past denial and the reality of this place. Jesus explained his mission further, describing his descent after the cross to declare victory over the forces of evil that had long enslaved humanity. The flames roared higher, their heat intensifying, the screams of the damned a constant reminder of the stakes, but he stood unshaken, his robe radiant, defying the filth around us. His authority made the air itself tremble, his love a force more powerful than the fires that consumed this realm. I stood in awe, my mind grappling with the magnitude of his presence in such a forsaken place. The air grew denser, the stench of rot and charred remains overwhelming, a constant reminder of my surroundings. Yet his light pushed back the despair, a shield against the hopelessness that threatened to engulf me. I saw souls chained to glowing rocks, their faces twisted in eternal agony, their cries a testament to their rejection of his grace. Jesus' presence was my sole hope, a truth I could no longer deny, a lifeline in a realm devoid of mercy. As he spoke, the demons retreated further into the shadows, their forms diminishing, their power shattered by the sound of his voice. The ground trembled, the heat searing my feet through the restored souls, but his words guided me through the chaos, a beacon of clarity in the turmoil. I felt unworthy, a sinner standing before such holiness, yet his gaze held no judgment, only an invitation to grasp his purpose. His mission was unmistakable, to proclaim victory, to show that hell had no hold over him, to offer hope even in the darkest depths. The flames continued to roar, their light casting grotesque shadows, the screams filling the air with unrelenting sorrow. Jesus' robe pulsed with life, a stark contrast to the death and decay around us, its radiance a symbol of his eternal purity. I saw more souls, their bodies contorted in torment, their suffering a warning of the fate awaiting those who turn from him. His words echoed in my mind, a call to embrace the salvation he offered, even here in the heart of hell, a truth that would forever alter my soul. Jesus turned to me, his voice clear and unwavering, cutting through the chaos to reveal truths I had never sought in life. He spoke of the Bible, a book one had once dismissed as mere folklore, unveiling its wisdom about this place of torment. He explained 4 terms that defined hell, each word a key to understanding the fate I narrowly escaped. The flames around us flickered, their heat a constant reminder of the reality he described, urging me to heed his teaching. Sheol, he began, is the Old Testament realm where all souls, righteous or wicked, went to wait before my coming, a shadowy place of silence and separation. The air stung my lungs, thick with sulfur, as I glimpsed shadows moving in the distance, their faces blank, lingering in a realm of endless waiting. Hades, its New Testament counterpart, holds the unrighteous until the final day of reckoning, a temporary prison for those who reject me. The ground burned beneath me, its embers searing, the screams echoing, painting a vivid picture of his words. Gehenna, he continued, is the fire of eternal punishment, named for a valley near Jerusalem where refuse burned without ceasing, a symbol of divine judgment, Mark 9:43. The flames leapt higher, their roar echoing his words, the heat searing my skin, a tangible reflection of the punishment he described. The lake of fire is the final destination for Satan, his angels, and those whose names are not written in the book of life, Revelation 20:10-15. The ground quaked, the air heavy with despair, his truth unyielding, a warning of the ultimate consequence for turning from him. I saw a man, his body scorched black, forced to walk on glowing coals for his greed, his screams piercing the air like a blade through cloth. Demons jabbed him with fiery spears, their laughter a cruel taunt, the stench of burning flesh choking my senses, a vivid illustration of his sin's consequence. A woman, bound in chains, had her tongue burned for spreading lies, her cries blending with the sulphurous haze, her torment a cycle without end. A thief's hands melted, reforming only to melt again, his pain eternal, a punishment tailored to his crimes, each scene a testament to divine justice. Their greatest sin, Jesus explained, was refusing to repent, rejecting his offer of salvation, sealing their fate by their own choices. He could not save those who turned from him, their suffering a direct result of their decisions. The flames roared louder, the air thick with despair, his words a heavy truth that pressed against my soul. Their torment mirrored my own past denial, a stark warning of what could have been my eternal fate. The air grew hotter, the stench more oppressive, a suffocating reminder of hell's reality. But Jesus' voice remained steady, a guide through the horror. I saw more souls, their bodies twisted in agony, their cries a chorus of regret, forever lost to the grace he offered. The ground burned relentlessly, the heat unyielding, but his teaching was clear, rooted in the truth of Scripture. Hell was real, its terms defined by God's word, its existence undeniable, a place I could no longer dismiss. As he spoke, the demons' taunts faded, their presence diminished by his overwhelming authority. The flames continued to burn, the screams filling the air, but his words brought clarity, a framework for understanding this realm of judgment. I saw the weight of their choices, the consequences of lives lived apart from God, each soul a lesson in the cost of rejection. His teaching was a call to recognize hell's reality, to turn to him before it was too late, a truth that burned brighter than the fires around me. Jesus continued, his voice clear and unwavering, slicing through the chaotic roar of hell's flames to address the lies I had clung to in life. Many believe Satan rules this place, he said, pointing to demons bound in chains, their charred, writhing forms contorted in agony, their once fearsome power shattered. He is a prisoner here, punished alongside those who followed him, not a king but a captive under God's justice. The air was thick with sulfur, the stench of rot so overwhelming it coated my throat, his truth a stark contrast to the myths I had once accepted without question. In my Chicago days, I had pictured Satan as a dark lord presiding over a fiery kingdom, a notion fueled by movies and casual barroom talk. Jesus' words dismantled this fantasy, revealing Satan's true state as a defeated foe, his red eyes dimming in torment. The ground beneath me burned, embers glowing like angry coals, each step searing my feet, a reminder of the reality he unveiled. His teaching exposed the deception I had embraced, a lie that had kept me blind to the truth of divine judgment. Others think hell is a place of revelry, a realm of pleasure for the wicked, he said, quoting Scripture's warning of weeping and gnashing of teeth, Matthew 8:12. The screams around us confirmed his words, a relentless wail of anguish that echoed off unseen walls, the ground scorching my soles with every movement. I had once scoffed at hell as a party for rebels, a place where the unrighteous thrived, but the torment I witnessed shattered this cruel dissect. Each cry, each flame, bore witness to the suffering that defined this place, a reality far removed from my careless assumptions. The air grew heavier, the heat pressing against my skin, but Jesus' voice remained steady, a beacon in the chaos. I saw souls writhing in the distance, their faces twisted in despair, their suffering a testament to the truth he spoke. The idea of hell as a haven for the wicked was a lie that had lulled me into complacency, a deception now burned away by the fires around me. His words were a call to see the truth, to reject the fantasies that had led so many to this pit. Purgatory is a myth, he declared, his tone firm, rooted in the truth of Scripture. Judgment follows death, with no intermediate state for redemption. Hebrews 9:27. He explained, dispelling the notion of a second chance. No such reprieve existed here, only fire and despair, the air laden with sulfur and decay, a reality that upended my vague hopes of afterlife leniency. Jesus clarified that a final judgment day awaited when all would face their eternal fate. Revelation 20:11-15, a truth that weighed heavily in the suffocating atmosphere. I recalled my mother's gentle warnings about judgment, words I had dismissed as outdated, believing in vague ideas of purgatory or eventual mercy. The flames leapt higher, their roar matching his words, the heat searing my skin as if to underscore the finality of his teaching. The notion of immediate hell was also false, he explained, as souls awaited the ultimate reckoning, a sobering reality that stripped away my illusions. Hell was not a temporary stop but a consequence, a truth I could no longer ignore. Some believed souls were destroyed, not punished eternally, a comforting lie to avoid the weight of judgment. Jesus corrected this, affirming eternal torment for the unrighteous, a punishment that endures without end, unyielding in its divine justice. The flames roared fiercer, their light casting grotesque shadows, the stench of burning flesh clinging to my senses, his teaching a reality that demanded attention. I saw souls suffering nearby, their cries a testament to his words, their fate a warning of the consequences of rejecting God's grace. The air grew denser, the heat more oppressive, a relentless assault on my body and mind, but Jesus' presence was a shield, a light in the darkness. The demons' laughter, once grating, faded into whimpers, their power broken by his radiant authority. Their taunts no match for the truth, he proclaimed. I saw the reality of hell, its nature far removed from the myths I had believed, a place of divine justice where choices bore eternal weight. His words were a call to clarity, a rejection of the lies that had led me astray. As he spoke, the ground trembled, cracks splitting open to release plumes of acrid steam, the screams sharpening into a chorus of regret. I reflected on my life, how I had mocked the idea of hell, dismissing it as a scare tactic, yet here I stood, surrounded by its undeniable truth. Jesus' teaching was a lifeline, a chance to see clearly, to embrace the salvation he offered even in this place of torment. His presence transformed the atmosphere, his light pushing back the despair that threatened to consume me. The flames continued to burn, their heat relentless, but Jesus' voice rose above the chaos, a steady guide through the horror. I saw more souls, their bodies contorted, their suffering a mirror of the lies they had chosen, a warning for my own soul. His words were a call to reject the deceptions that led to this pit, to choose the truth of his salvation, a truth that could save others if I carried it forward. Hell was real, its justice unyielding, but his grace was a hope that shone brighter, a promise I could not turn away from. As Jesus stood before me, his radiant form blazed with divine light that cut through the choking shadows of hell. He did not flinch as the flames danced around us, his presence untouched by the filth and torment of that place. In a voice steady and full of purpose, he began to reveal why he had come. I preached to the spirits in prison, he said, his gaze reaching beyond the present to the ancient past. These were the souls who had rebelled in the days of Noah, long before my time, yet still awaiting the declaration of his victory. His words echoed with authority, not as an offer of salvation to the condemned, but as a royal proclamation that evil had been conquered. The air burned with the heat of sulfur and ash, yet his voice pierced through it like light through thick fog. I could feel the earth tremble beneath my feet as he spoke, not from fear, but from the weight of truth being revealed. The spirits of hell had no defense against his message. He explained that through his death and resurrection, he had overcome both sin and death. He now held the keys to death and Hades, keys earned through the blood he shed and the grave he conquered. His triumph was not confined to heaven, for even here, in this place of sorrow, his reign was absolute. The demons who once seemed so powerful now cowered in silence, their fiery pride broken in the presence of the king. They trembled like leaves in a storm as he stood firm and fearless. The burning earth seemed to shrink beneath his feet, overwhelmed by his majesty. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the gravity of what I was witnessing. Every word Jesus spoke burned away my ignorance, replacing it with understanding. His mission in this realm was not about suffering, but about declaring once and for all that the curse had been undone. Before his crucifixion, heaven's gates were locked by mankind's sin. Even the righteous awaited in Sheol, barred from entering the fullness of God's presence. But now, by his sacrifice, Jesus had shattered that wall and led the faithful into everlasting life. He fulfilled the prophecy that he would descend and ascend, claiming victory not just for the living but for the dead who had waited in faith. His robe glowed with a purity untouched by the filth that surrounded us. I watched in awe, as even the flame seemed to step back from his holy presence. In the distance, the screams of the damned still echoed, a reminder that this place remained real for those who rejected him. Yet his light carved out a space of peace, a sanctuary of truth amid the torment. His victory was like a banner lifted high, signaling to every soul that the war had been won. The stench of burning flesh and decay filled the air, but it could not drown out the fragrance of his presence. He radiated the scent of heaven, sweet and pure, a balm that soothed the anguish within me. The contrast between his beauty and the ugliness of hell was more than visual, it was spiritual. Hell had not drawn him here in defeat. He came of his own will, not as a victim but as the risen Lord, declaring judgment and revealing grace. His descent was the completion of his mission, proof that there was no corner of existence untouched by his reach. The flames intensified, their color deepening, yet he remained still, unshaken by the fury around us. His eyes carried the weight of eternity, filled with sorrow for the lost and hope for the redeemed. His words did not waver, and in them I heard the echo of ages past and ages to come. He told me that the gates of hell had never stood a chance against him. With one word, he had silenced centuries of darkness. The devil and his forces were not rulers of this realm, but captives under divine authority. I saw how the fallen angels cowered before him, their chains glowing red with judgment. They had no words, no defense, no hiding place from the one who had come to declare their end. His presence was not a visit, it was a verdict. The ground cracked beneath us, releasing jets of green smoke and bitter ash, but his voice remained firm. He spoke not just to me but to every spirit, living or dead, proclaiming that his blood had made a way back to the Father. No force in heaven or hell could ever reverse what he had done. My heart was overwhelmed with the weight of his truth. His love, poured out even here, had become a fire that outshone every flame in hell. He offered not sympathy, but sovereignty, a victory earned through suffering and secured by resurrection. Though my feet still burned, and the smell of rot clung to me, I was no longer afraid. His triumph had given me clarity and courage. I knew now that hell was not the end of the story for those who called on his name. As he moved, the shadows fled, retreating into cracks and corners where his light had not yet reached. But even there his presence lingered, a promise that the darkness would not win. His mission had lit a fire in my soul, one I would carry back into the world above. What he did in hell was not just a historical moment. It was a living declaration that death has no victory and sin no power over those who belong to him. I had seen his glory in the lowest place imaginable, and now I understood what it truly meant to be saved. Jesus told me that his descent into hell was not a moment of loss, but a declaration of absolute victory. His voice was calm yet commanding, cutting through the flames and cries with the authority of eternal truth. He came not in weakness but in glory, proclaiming triumph over every power of darkness and death. He had broken the ancient chains that held humanity captive, unlocking the gates of eternity for those who choose to believe. His presence was not just a visit but a royal announcement that the curse of sin had been defeated. In that inferno of sorrow, his words became a bright flame that no shadow could overcome. The flames around us roared with fury, yet they recoiled as he spoke, as if creation itself recognized its true king. The darkness trembled in the presence of the light that knew no fear. Though hell burned, his words carried life, a hope untouched by even the fiercest torment. Every movement he made was filled with purpose, each glance releasing waves of peace in a place ruled by terror. He was not afraid, not burdened by the flames or the cries, but stood as the embodiment of mercy and judgment. Hell could not dim his purity, nor alter his love. I saw demons shrink back, their twisted forms trembling in dread, unable to stand beneath the weight of his glory. Their laughter ceased, their authority vanished, and even the fire seemed to bend away from him. The smell of rot and ash lost its sting where his presence stood. Jesus was not just a visitor to hell but the Lord over it, displaying that even in the depths, he reigns supreme. His love was stronger than the screams, more powerful than the torment and more enduring than the despair. I realized in that moment that his mercy could reach even here. He showed me a path, a way leading out of the darkness and into light, and I knew it was not just for me, but for all who would call upon his name. That path was narrow, forged by sacrifice, but it gleamed with the promise of redemption. Every step on it whispered grace, a chance to be free. This truth was not reserved for the holy or righteous, but extended to every soul willing to repent. His message was not limited by fire or time, and even the damned could feel the power of his voice. Salvation was nearer than I had ever believed, closer than my very breath. The air remained thick with sorrow, but his words began clearing the fog from my soul. I felt a stirring deep within, a desire to live again, to tell others of this love that had rescued me. My old self had been blind, but now my eyes burned with purpose. The pain under my feet did not vanish, but it lost its power, because now I had meaning. His mission was not only to save me, but to send me, to use me as a witness of what he had done. I knew I could never live the same again. The heat raged on, the flames rising higher, but his truth was a shelter that no fire could touch. I watched him speak with a confidence that made the demons retreat into silence. His robe was untouched by soot, shining with the radiance of eternal holiness. He was not shaken by the horror around us, for his authority ruled even this place. I saw that his mission had not ended at the cross, but continued into the depths to proclaim dominion. Hell had no answer to his presence, no weapon that could stop him. Each scream around us echoed the cost of rebellion, but his voice carried the offer of return. He did not plead, he declared. His words were both invitation and warning, filled with love but rooted in unshakable truth. I looked around and saw souls twisted in pain, their decisions etched into every scar and cry. They had chosen this place, and yet even now his light reached them. He did not gloat, he grieved. The flames continued to burn, but they did not consume me because he had covered me. His eyes were fixed on mine, and I knew he was not done with me yet. What I had seen would be the message I would bring to the world. Demons scattered like ash in the wind, their once proud forms diminished into whimpers. The fires that once seemed eternal now felt smaller next to his infinite presence. I was not just a witness, I was a soul reborn in the presence of truth. His light became my path, his voice my compass, his mission my new life. He offered me a truth I could carry forever, one that no shadow could silence. This victory was not just a moment, it was an eternal truth. Jesus looked at me, his eyes piercing with divine clarity, and said, "Return and strengthen your faith." Without change, this fiery pit would be my eternal fate, a warning that echoed deep within my soul, urging me to heed his call. The flames roared fiercely, the air thick with the acrid stench of sulfur, but his command was clear, a mission I could not ignore. I had been given a second chance, a call to live for him, to carry his truth to a world desperately in need of salvation. I awoke in my car, crashed against a gnarled tree, teetering precariously over a dark ravine, the cold night air biting against my bruised skin. Fear gripped me, but I stayed still, knowing one wrong move could send me plummeting to my death, the memory of hell's torment vivid in my mind. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, and called for help, each moment filled with the echo of Jesus' voice whispering, "You will be safe." His promise steadied my shaking soul, a lifeline in the face of mortal danger. Help arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, pulling me from the twisted wreckage, my body bruised but miraculously alive, a gift I knew I didn't deserve. I prayed, my heart overflowing with gratitude, recalling every moment, every truth he had shown me in the depths of hell. Death was no longer a terror, but a doorway to eternal life with God, a truth that reshaped my entire existence, filling me with purpose. The hospital room was quiet, the sterile air a stark contrast to hell's chaos, my soul brimming with his presence, his words a song of hope that would never fade. I wrote down every detail of my experience, my hand steady as I poured out the testimony of his power and boundless love, determined to share it with anyone who would listen. My life transformed in ways I never imagined. I found a new job, one that honored my newfound faith, built a family grounded in love, and embraced a faith that stood unshaken against life's storms. The screams of hell lingered in my memory, a haunting echo, but his light guided me, a beacon of hope that burned brighter with each passing day. I lived boldly, proclaiming his truth, knowing nothing could separate me from his eternal love. The memory of hell's torment stayed with me, the stench of sulfur, the searing fire, the cries of the damned, a constant reminder of the fate I had escaped through his mercy. Yet heaven's promise drove me forward, a call to warn others, to lead them to Jesus before they faced the same abyss. I spoke at churches, my voice steady, shared with friends over quiet conversations, urging them to seek him, to choose life over the shadow of death. His salvation was real, a gift I had witnessed firsthand, a truth I would carry forever, a mission to proclaim until my final breath. The weight of my experience shaped every aspect of my life, from the way I spoke to the way I loved those around me, each moment a reflection of his grace. The hospital's white walls faded into the background as I left, stepping into a world I now saw with new eyes, a world desperate for the hope I carried. I saw the faces of strangers, each one a soul with a choice, and I vowed to share his message, to be a light in their darkness. His love was a fire that burned within me, a truth that no trial could extinguish, a call to live for him every day. The echoes of hell's screams were a warning, but they were drowned out by the promise of eternity, a promise that gave me courage to face the world. I stood at pulpits, sat in living rooms, walked through city streets, sharing the story of the Savior who met me in the depths. His salvation was not just for me, but for all who would listen, a gift that could transform lives, a truth that could break chains. I carried his message with urgency, knowing the stakes, knowing the hope he offered, a hope that had saved me from the fire. Each day was a step in his light, a chance to reflect his love, to show others the path he had shown me in that fiery pit. The memory of his voice, his touch, his radiant presence was a constant guide, a reminder of the mission he had given me. I lived to honor him, to share the truth of his salvation, to lead others to the one who had conquered hell. His love was my strength, his truth my purpose, a promise I would carry until I stood before him again, redeemed and whole. John's testimony is a thunderous wake-up call, revealing the stark reality of hell and the triumphant power of Jesus Christ, who conquered it. He stood face to face with the Savior in the depths, witnessing his victory over sin and death, a hope offered to all who choose faith. His story challenges us to examine our own paths. Are we walking toward God's eternal light or chasing the fleeting pleasures of this world? Share this message with urgency, live boldly for Jesus, and trust in the promise of his salvation, a gift that transcends all darkness. We invite you to join us in praying for the strength to walk in faith, to share the gospel with courage, and to live as witnesses to his truth. Subscribe to our channel and comment your name and city below to stand with our community in this sacred mission. In our next story, prepare to hear the chilling testimony of a soul who saw a powerful figure in hell, a sobering reminder that neither status nor false piety can secure salvation. Stay tuned, and may God's light guide your every step. He once thought his life was over when he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for a fatal mistake. But the real tragedy was only just beginning. After being released, a horrific accident left Michael in a near-death state. He did not see heaven, nor did he hear the voices of angels. Instead, he was dragged down into hell. There he came face to face with someone he could never mistake, Adolf Hitler. The man who once held absolute power was now screaming in agony, tormented beyond imagination. How was Hitler punished for the monstrous crimes he committed? After all the suffering he has endured, does he deserve forgiveness? Listen closely to this haunting testimony. Hello, Eternal Bible Stories channel. My name is Michael Jazz. I had this vision on April 24, 2021, and I feel compelled to share it with your audience. I grew up in a violent neighborhood where fights and stabbings were as common as the rising sun. For most of my life, I was known as a hot-tempered and impulsive man. My father abandoned our family when I was just a child, leaving my mother to work 3 different jobs just to put food on the table. Without a father figure to guide me, I quickly strayed down the wrong path and fell in with the wrong crowd. By the time I was 15, I was already involved in petty theft. By the age of 18, I was fully immersed in gang life. But it wasn't just the thrill of rebellion that pulled me into this world. It was the deep desire to belong, to be part of something bigger than myself. That, combined with the illusion of respect, led me further and further into a life of crime. Under the suffocating atmosphere of a run-down bar on the outskirts of the city, I walked in with the simple intention of having a few drinks before heading home. The pulsating music, the thick haze of cigarette smoke mingling with the overpowering scent of alcohol filled the air. I had set foot in places like this hundreds of times before, but this night would bring about a tragedy that would alter my life forever. As the night wore on, the tension within me swelled like a fire ready to erupt. I wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found me first. A man named Mark accidentally bumped into me, spilling his drink all over my shirt. A minor incident, a seemingly harmless moment, but to me, at that time, it felt like an unforgivable insult. Harsh words were exchanged, and tempers flared. I don't remember exactly who provoked whom first, only that everything escalated too quickly. Mark shoved me hard, and in a moment of blind fury I lashed out with all the anger that had been simmering inside me for so long. My fist connected directly with his jaw, the sickening sound of bone hitting bone silencing the entire bar. Mark collapsed, his head striking the floor with a dull thud. And then stillness. The next few moments unfolded like a nightmare. I dropped to my knees, shaking his shoulders, my voice stammering with disbelief. "Get up, man. Mark, wake up." But he never opened his eyes again. Regret hit me like ice-cold water dousing my face, but it could not erase the horrifying truth before me. The air in the bar became unbearably heavy. Someone screamed. Someone called the police. Eyes turned toward me, filled with horror, anger, and disgust. I stood frozen amid the chaos, my mind blank, my body trembling as if I had been struck down myself. I hadn't meant to kill him. I never wanted this to happen, but how could I deny it? Mark was dead because of me. The wailing of sirens tore through the night, flashing red and blue lights casting eerie reflections on my sweat-drenched face as I was handcuffed and shoved into the police car. The officer read me my rights, but I barely heard anything beyond the deafening thud of my own heartbeat. For the first time in my life, I no longer felt strong. I was no longer just a petty thief or a street brawler. I was a murderer. The trial moved faster than I had expected. I sat there in silence, watching the grief-stricken faces of Mark's family, his mother's tears carving deep lines of pain across her cheeks as she stared at me as if searching for answers to a loss that could never be undone. My lawyer pleaded with the jury, arguing that this was nothing more than a tragic accident, that I had not intended to take his life. But the prosecution did not allow me the luxury of justification. They painted me as a violent, dangerous man, a threat to society that needed to be locked away. A part of me knew they weren't wrong. My unchecked rage had led me here, and now I would have to pay the price. When the judge struck the gavel and announced 15 years in prison for manslaughter, I heard my mother's anguished sobs from the back of the courtroom. That sound cut through me like a blade straight to the heart. I hadn't just destroyed Mark's life, I had shattered my own family as well. As the officers escorted me out of the courtroom, I turned back for one last glimpse of my mother, her eyes brimming with pain, disappointment, and a deep, consuming fear for her son's future. That was the last image I carried with me as I stepped through the prison gates into a world where cold walls and iron bars would confine me for the next 15 years. The first years in prison were an unending nightmare. Prison was more than just a loss of freedom. It was a slow, agonizing descent into regret. Each day behind bars felt like a life sentence in itself, not because of the walls that confined me, but because of the guilt that consumed me. I avoided trouble, steering clear of the frequent fights that erupted among inmates, but no matter how much I tried to escape conflict, I couldn't outrun my own mind. I wasn't a cold-blooded killer, yet that didn't change the fact that I had taken a life. Every night, lying in my cramped cell, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the same haunting question. If I had controlled my anger for just a second longer, would my life have turned out differently? Through it all, my mother never abandoned me. She visited me every week, her presence a painful reminder of everything I had lost. She shared stories of the world outside, the changes in our neighborhood, updates on old friends, small joys that should have brought me comfort. But instead of feeling connected to life beyond these bars, I felt even more detached. With every visit, every goodbye, I sank deeper into the isolation of my own existence. I slowly accepted that this was my fate, to spend my youth in a cell, paying the price for a moment of rage that had cost a man his life. Then, when I least expected it, hope arrived. 6 years into my sentence, my lawyer came to see me with news that could change everything. A new witness had come forward, someone who had been at the bar that night and had seen the full story unfold. His name was Tom, and for reasons unknown he had never spoken out before. But now he was ready to testify. Mark had been the aggressor, repeatedly provoking me, even shoving me before I retaliated. What had once been seen as a violent attack was now being reconsidered as self-defense. The moment my lawyer filed for an appeal, the waiting game began. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I refused to let hope take root, fearing the devastation of another disappointment. But then, the day arrived. Once again I stood in the courtroom, but this time I wasn't just a convicted man awaiting judgment. I had a chance to prove the truth. Tom took the witness stand, his voice steady and firm. He recounted every detail of that night, the way Mark had been aggressive, how he had taunted and shoved me, and how I had only reacted when I felt threatened. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. I saw doubt flicker in the eyes of the jury, contemplation on the judge's face, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt something other than despair. Then, the moment that changed everything. After a long deliberation, the judge overturned my original sentence. My charge was reduced to involuntary manslaughter, and since I had already served more than enough time for that offense, I was to be released immediately. The words hit me like a tidal wave. The weight I had carried for years suddenly felt lighter, though not completely gone. I turned to see my mother, her face wet with tears, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming relief. Stepping out of prison after years of confinement should have been a moment of celebration, but instead I felt like a stranger in a world I once knew. The streets seemed different, the people more distant. I was free, yet I no longer felt like the man who had once walked those streets. The prison doors had opened, but the past still loomed over me like a shadow. I had been legally forgiven, but the real question remained: could I ever forgive myself? Walking out of prison, I felt like a stranger in a world I once knew. The streets were busier, the buildings taller, and the people around me didn't seem to notice I existed. My mother was the only familiar presence, waiting with tears of joy. She pulled me into a silent embrace, her love unwavering despite everything. She had never given up on me, even when the world had. Adjusting to life outside was harder than I imagined. Simple things, using a smartphone, making payments, felt foreign, but the biggest challenge was finding work. No matter where I applied, restaurants, gas stations, construction sites, I was always rejected. The words, "We'll call you," never led to a call. It felt like I was still trapped, just in a different kind of prison. I wondered if I'd ever be truly free. In desperation, I turned to a place I had never considered: the church. In prison, I had read the Bible not out of faith, but to cling to something in the darkness. Now, stepping through those church doors, I expected judgment, but found only open arms. No whispers, no stares, just genuine acceptance. The pastor placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Welcome home." For the first time, I felt like I belonged, not in a gang, not behind bars, but in a place of true peace. Prayer meetings became my refuge. Each sermon, each prayer, filled the emptiness I had carried for years. Slowly I realized God had never abandoned me. Not when I took a life, not when I sat in that prison cell. He had led me here, offering a second chance. My first job after prison was at the church. Cleaning, setting up for services, helping where needed. It wasn't much, but it gave me something priceless. Purpose. No longer running from my past, I began guiding others who had walked similar paths, sharing my story, listening to theirs. Bit by bit, I changed. I was no longer the reckless, angry man I once was. This time, I had truly found the light, and I wasn't letting go. That morning, I woke up energized, ready to embrace a new day with purpose. Since my release, I had been searching for meaning, and volunteering at the community center felt like a way to give back and atone for my past. The aging building, once a refuge for the homeless, had deteriorated badly, making renovation urgent. My group was tasked with clearing out old furniture and debris to prepare for construction. Despite warnings about the building's instability, we worked eagerly, unaware of the hidden dangers. Around noon, most volunteers stepped outside for a break, but I stayed behind to finish clearing an upstairs room cluttered with abandoned items. I had no idea that this small decision would change my life forever. As I moved damp, rotting boxes, a sharp creak sounded beneath my feet. A chill ran through me. I glanced around, searching for the source, but before I could react, the floor trembled. The worn wooden beams finally gave way. I barely had time to take a breath before everything collapsed. I plunged into empty space, swallowed by a whirlwind of dust and splintered wood. There was nothing to grab, nothing to stop the fall. The impact was instant and brutal. Pain surged through my body like fire. My breath came in shallow gasps before fading altogether. The world around me blurred, voices turning into distant echoes. Darkness crept in. The pain, the weight of my body, everything vanished into an eerie stillness. My heartbeat slowed, each beat fainter than the last, like a door quietly closing. I realized I was hovering at the fragile edge between life and death, but I had no idea that my true journey was only just beginning. An overwhelming emptiness consumed me, as if I were drifting aimlessly in an endless void. No up, no down, no concept of time or space to anchor myself. I could no longer feel the weight of my body or experience any sensation as I once did. There was only absolute silence, a suffocating darkness that felt as though the entire world had ceased to exist. I didn't know where I was, whether I was alive or dead, but deep inside, I knew something was terribly wrong. Then, a crushing weight settled over me, an unbearable heaviness, as if an immense force was pressing down upon my very soul. A searing heat began to spread, not like the warmth of the sun or the flames of an earthly fire, but an agonizing burn from the inside out, seeping into the deepest corners of my being. The air felt like it was being sucked away, leaving me gasping for breath that I could not take. When I finally forced my eyes open, the sight before me froze me in sheer terror. This was no longer the community center, no longer the world I had once known. I was no longer amidst the rubble. I had stepped into another realm, one I never imagined I would ever see. A shiver ran down my spine as the realization struck me with full force. I had fallen into hell. The scene before me was nothing short of horrifying, far beyond any nightmare I had ever experienced. The entire landscape was a wasteland of ashes and unending fire, a hellish expanse that no words could truly capture. The ground beneath my feet was not solid earth, but thick layers of blackened soot, smouldering as if they had once been something entirely consumed by flames. Raging rivers of molten lava slithered through jagged rock formations like colossal serpents, bubbling violently, emitting deep, guttural sounds like the pulsing veins of some monstrous entity. Above me, the sky was no longer an endless blue canopy but a dense, suffocating abyss, swirling with ominous clouds that pulsed with eerie, red-tinged light, like the watchful, burning eyes of a hidden predator lurking in the shadows. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the horrors unfolding around me. Everywhere I looked, I saw tormented souls enduring punishments beyond human comprehension. Some were imprisoned in iron cages, ablaze with an unrelenting fire, writhing in perpetual agony. Others were suspended mid-air, their wrists shackled by glowing chains that burned like molten metal, stretching their bodies in everlasting torment. Some were submerged in pools of liquid fire, their anguished screams piercing through the thick, oppressive air, yet they could never truly perish. Their cries blended together in a haunting symphony of despair and regret, an echo of eternal suffering that never ceased. Amidst this infernal chaos, I gradually became aware of something peculiar. Though I could feel the suffocating heat, hear every agonized scream with stark clarity, and witness the unimaginable horrors taking place before me, I was untouched. I was not burning. I was not bound. I was not suffering as the others were. I was merely an observer, an unwilling witness to the torment, standing in the midst of hell, yet somehow spared from its wrath. But this did not bring me any relief. Instead, it filled me with an even deeper dread. An unanswered question gnawed at my mind. Why was I here? Why was I not being punished? What was I meant to see? A growing urgency surged within me, a foreboding sense that I had been shown this place for a purpose I had yet to understand. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape this nightmare, but deep down, I knew I couldn't. I was trapped here, forced to witness every atrocity unfolding before my eyes. These horrors were not just figments of a disturbed dream. They were a terrifying reality I had never believed in until now. Hell was real, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The harrowing screams of torment still echoed through the air, but amidst the chaos my eyes fixated on a familiar figure, a face I had only seen in history books, in war documentaries, on propaganda posters that once spread fear and destruction to millions. Adolf Hitler. The infamous dictator, the man who once wielded absolute power, was now writhing in unbearable pain, chained to a massive flaming boulder. I stood frozen, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. This was not the Hitler from history, the one with a commanding presence, fiery speeches, and an unshakable aura of authority. No, this was a broken soul, a man who had lost everything, including himself. His face was grotesquely twisted in ceaseless agony, his flesh charred and peeling under the merciless inferno of hell. His once intense, ambitious eyes were now hollow and vacant, filled with a bottomless despair beyond description. Even in the midst of this terrifying landscape, I felt an inexplicable pull of curiosity. I needed to hear what he had to say. As I stepped closer, Hitler slowly lifted his gaze and met my eyes. A shiver ran down my spine. Gone was the look of a man who believed himself invincible. What remained was the gaze of someone who had finally realized the truth, but far too late. Before I could utter a single word, he spoke first. His voice was hoarse, broken, as if centuries of screaming had stripped it down to nothing but raw agony. I thought I was invincible. I believed history would justify my actions, but now I see the truth. I am condemned to this place for the suffering I have caused, for the countless lives I destroyed. The moment he finished speaking, the shadows around him stirred violently. As if awaiting this precise moment, monstrous creatures emerged, their grotesque forms illuminated by the hellfire. Demons. With glowing red eyes and twisted, hideous bodies, they descended upon Hitler with horrifying savagery. Their claws tore into his flesh, their fangs sank deep into his already burned body. He let out an agonized scream, a sound so filled with torment that it rattled through my very soul. The demons howled in sadistic delight as they dragged him down, deeper into the flames. The lava below roared as it surged upward, engulfing his contorted body, sizzling and cracking as the last remnants of his earthly form were consumed by the raging fire. I stood motionless, my mind unable to process what I had just witnessed. But before I could even begin to recover, my eyes caught sight of another soul. This time, it wasn't a dictator. It wasn't a man known for war or genocide. This was someone entirely different. A celebrity, a face recognized across the world, a man who had once graced the screens of millions, admired and adored. I knew his name. I could have spoken it aloud, but something deep within me held me back. It was not my place to reveal him. It was as if I had been restrained by a divine force, as if the decision to name him was beyond my authority. Some may find this difficult to understand, but I knew I could only share what I was meant to share. As I stepped closer, he lifted his head. Tears streamed down his face, his expression one of overwhelming regret and sorrow. I did not need to ask him anything. He spoke on his own, his voice trembling, heavy with remorse. I once stood at the peak of success, fame, fortune, admiration. I had it all, but it was never enough. I always wanted more, and I was willing to pay any price. In a moment of weakness, I made a deal with the devil. I sold my soul for success, believing it would bring me happiness, but it was all a lie. Satan took everything from me, my peace, my joy, even my very soul. And now I am here, trapped in eternal torment, paying the price for my greed and ambition. Paying the price for my greed and ambition. His voice broke, and for a moment he hesitated, but then he uttered a final sentence, one that sent an unbearable chill down my spine. Don't make the same mistake I did. Before I could react, the demons came for him. Just as they had done with Hitler, they lunged from the darkness, grabbing him with merciless strength. Their claws dug deep into his flesh as they dragged him across the scorching ground, their cruel laughter mixing with his desperate scream. He struggled, but there was no escape, no mercy, no second chance. In an instant, he was swallowed by the abyss. The fire rose, and he was gone. I stood there paralyzed, my heart heavy with a terror I had never known. What I had just witnessed was not merely punishment, it was a warning. Hell was not just a place for tyrants like Hitler. It was not reserved only for the most notorious villains of history. It was also the destination of those who had traded their souls for fleeting earthly gains. A single, haunting question echoed in my mind. Did I deserve to be here too? And in that moment, I knew I had to find a way to escape. I felt a force, powerful, unrelenting, yanking me away from the terrifying grasp of hell. The movement was so swift that I barely had time to comprehend what was happening. A surge of light enveloped me, pulling me into a whirlwind of invisible energy, wrenching me away from the screams and the eternal flames. The searing heat, the suffocating despair, and the overwhelming fear slowly faded, replaced by a strange numbness as I was hurled back toward the world I once belonged to. I gasped awake, as if surfacing from the depths of an ocean after nearly drowning. My breath came in ragged, desperate gulps, my chest burning as though it had been crushed under an unbearable weight. The blinding white of hospital lights forced me to squint, and unfamiliar yet concerned faces hovered over me. Doctors and nurses bustled around, checking my vitals, while the steady beep of a heart monitor reassured me that somehow, against all odds, I was alive. I overheard someone say that I had been in a coma for 3 days following the building collapse. By some miracle, I had been pulled back from the brink of death. My physical wounds began to heal, but my mind was far from recovered. I couldn't forget what I had seen. I had heard stories of near-death experiences, of people encountering Jesus, seeing angels, or being embraced by the warm glow of heaven. But my journey had been completely different. Instead of paradise, I had been thrust into hell. Instead of comfort, I had witnessed the absolute absence of hope. Instead of divine peace, I had been shown the horrifying reality of eternal suffering. A haunting question gnawed at my soul. Why hadn't I seen heaven? What did it mean for me? Did it mean I was unworthy of salvation? These questions tormented me in the days that followed, leaving me feeling stranded in an emptiness I couldn't escape. But slowly, clarity began to emerge. My experience in hell was not a punishment, it was a lesson. God had not condemned me, He had warned me. He had given me a glimpse of what awaited those who refused to turn back. The absence of heaven in my journey was not a rejection, but rather a call to action. What I had seen was not a hallucination or a trick of the mind. It was a divine message. A mission had been entrusted to me. I had to change. I had to live righteously. And I had to warn others. I was no longer Michael of the past. My journey through hell had transformed me inside and out. I could not waste this second chance. I had been given an opportunity to redeem myself, to use every moment of my life for good, to choose righteousness over darkness before it was too late. This transformation wasn't just internal, it manifested in action. I returned to church, but this time I wasn't just another silent face in the back pew. I immersed myself in community service, sharing my testimony and reaching out to those lost in the same darkness I had once embraced. I began speaking to young men standing at the same crossroads I had once faced, those who believed power, money, and status would fulfill them, but were blindly walking toward destruction. I started holding meetings, sharing my terrifying experience, not to scare people, but to open their eyes to the spiritual reality they ignored. I recounted my journey at church gatherings, community events, and even on media platforms. I no longer feared judgment or skepticism. I knew this was my calling, to warn the world that hell is real, sin has consequences, and only Jesus can save us from that fate. But I didn't want my transformation to be just words. I wanted it to be action. I joined charities, helping the homeless, reaching out to those abandoned by society. I felt compelled to support former prisoners, guiding them back into society, encouraging them to find meaning beyond crime and despair. I no longer sought respect through violence or fear. I sought it through acts of true value. This change was not instant. It was a long, ongoing journey. But I knew I was not alone. God had given me a second chance, and I refused to waste it. I had once been lost. I had stood at the edge of eternal destruction, but now I knew the truth. Life is a precious gift, and every moment is an opportunity to change. If you are reading this, if you feel an emptiness inside that nothing seems to fill, if you are on a path that you don't know how to turn back from, know this: it is not too late. You can change and you can start again. All you need to do is turn back to God.